Our next speaker, Juan Gorricho, is Senior Vice President of Data and Analytics in the Global Product and Innovation Group at TSYS, where he is responsible for leading the development and implementation of TSYS data and analytics strategy aimed at enhancing existing and developing new data products for TSYS clients. Before joining TSYS, Goriccho served as Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Partners Federal Credit Union, one of the top credit unions in the country exclusively serving the Walt Disney Company employees, where he led the development and execution of Partners' data strategy. Prior to Partners, Goriccho led multiple multi-million-dollar projects to implement business intelligence and analytical solutions for key lines of business such as labor, operations, and merchandise within the Walt Disney Company Parks and Resorts segment. Goriccho has more than 15 years of experience in the data and analytics space and frequently speaks at data and analytics related conferences. Goriccho holds an industrial engineering degree from Universidad de los Andes in Bogotá, Colombia, and a master's degree of business administration from the Darden Graduate School of Business Administration at the University of Virginia. Please welcome Juan Gorricho.
Thank you. So no pressure after that, all the technical challenges. So good afternoon. So as the introduction said, my name is Juan Gorricho. I currently lead the data analytics group at TSYS. I know it was pronounced as TSYS in the introduction. Very few people knows, and that's a good thing. I'll explain why in a second. But before joining TSYS, I've been about 2 years with TSYS, but before joining TSYS, I spent about 10 years at the Walt Disney Company, as the introduction said, in leading several different teams doing data and analytics, everything from people operations, forecasting the labor that works at the parks. As a fun fact, in the parks and hotels at Disney, you have about 40 to 60,000 employees working daily. So we're building models that optimize how much labor do you need based on weather, based on bookings. I also ran the analytics line of business for the retail business at Disney. Disney has more than 400 stores in the parks and the hotels that sell about $1.6 billion on, essentially key plushes, keychains and plushes that, you guys buy when you go to the parks. So appreciate your business. But then I joined TSYS 2 years ago to lead the data analytics journey at TSYS. So in a nutshell, right, we're a payments company. We're one of the largest payments processing companies in the country and in many parts of the world. You probably haven't heard of us because our biggest clients are actually banks. We work with banks, with credit card issuers, that actually, for whom we process on behalf of them, credit card processing. So we have about 200 plus clients across the world. We have in our systems more than 500 million active cards on file. So these are credit cards on file that we process on behalf of our clients, which amount basically to processing more than 20 billion transactions a year. So what that means is that when you use your credit card, you swipe your card at the POS, the transaction comes through either Visa or MasterCard to us. And basically we do all the behind the scenes processing. That means we check if the card's valid, has the balance, right? If it's a fraud transaction or not, and then we return in milliseconds basically approval or decline. To give you a little bit of context, depending on how you count, and us and all the competitors have different metrics on how we count things, depending which one serves us best. But basically, we process on average more than 40% of the consumer credit card markets in the US, about 80% of the corporate credit card market in North America as well. So it means that 40% of the transactions that you do with your credit cards, most likely are processed by us behind the scenes. So what that means is that we have plenty of data, right? And basically our data journey started, I want to say a couple of years ago, but the representative moment was last year during Investor Day, when our CEO told Wall Street that in order to transform the business, to change the business from being focused on core processing, which is the business of processing credit card payments, to add much more value-added products and services, we were going to focus on 4 pillars. As you can see here, one of the pillars is actually data analytics. So think about this as a statement that was made in May of last year. It's a 50,000 feet level statement done by the CEO of a Fortune company to the investors saying, we are going to focus on data analytics. We'll be a data company. The key thing was that behind the scenes, there was nothing except the idea of doing this, right? So the challenge is how do you get from there using the data that we have to actually delivering a successful data strategy, which is exactly where we are. And I kind of feel that I'm kind of after hearing all the cool presentations this morning, all the stuff around the technology and the algorithms, I'm kind of gonna pop your bubble, right? This stuff is hard. This stuff is not easy, right? And there's a lot of focus on the technology aspects of it, on the algorithms, but there's way more things that you need to focus on to be successful in data analytics. And that's what I've seen at TSYS and at Disney during my experience. So where did that leave us last year, right? We have a lot of data. There's no ifs and buts, right? 22 billion transactions, that's equivalent to 3 trillion transactions, $3 trillion of value processed on our systems on a yearly basis. But we didn't have the capabilities to exploit it. And furthermore, we didn't know what to do with it. Saying that we had data was creating no value for us because we had the data. But first of all, it was buried deeply on the mainframes. I'm kind of scared to use the word mainframe in this audience because I don't know, like so young, I don't know if you guys know what a mainframe is, but it's a really, really, really big, old, computing machine that runs the bulk of the financial services industry, by the way. But also we didn't know what to do with it, right? So we know we have data, but just having data wasn't creating value for us. That's equivalent, a colleague of mine used to have an expression to say, that's like saying like, hey, I know there's this mine full of diamonds, they're huge diamonds, but it's in this country it's in the middle of a civil war, so I cannot get, but I can see it from Google Maps. It's there, I can see it. That's exactly where we were. Lots of data, no ways to explore it, don't know what to do with it. So in essence, right, the challenge was we have significant amounts of data. We had made commitments to our investors, our shareholders, and stakeholders. And then so the challenge was how to get to business value, how to get to data monetization. And by data monetization, clearly I don't mean selling data. That's the initial reaction many people has, is actually how do we create valuable data products, how do we change the culture of the company to truly realize the value of data. So last year, around October of last year, the marketing team, the PR team said, hey, why don't we write an article about the journey so far? Like, just as a way of have an internal magazine, share the story. And we did, and I call that sort of a therapeutic moment because the challenges that I started in January of last year, it was October, 10 months had gone by with made significant progress. But so if I take a step back, what have we learned? What does it take to get buy-in from the top to drive your analytics program forward, right? And as the lesson here is that, again, there's no shortage of problems to be solved with data analytics, right? There's no shortage of data. It's how do you get all the pieces in line to actually solve the problems and get the buying momentum to implement that, right? Because there's a lot of academic or desktop exercises that can be done, just download data and, at leisure learn. But if you want to really create value in companies, it takes more than that. And we summarized it in four key themes, which are going to be the topics of my presentation today, is the importance of strategic alignment. How do you need to, what I call lead by example, but it's more like change management. How do you drive change management to actually change the culture of organization to adopt data analytics? The importance of education. We heard it at the panel before, that you have constantly be educating the organization on data culture, data change, right, and how to adopt and embrace that, and how to manage expectations. So I apologize because this is as technical as I'm going to get today. This is the most detailed technical slide I have today. And the reason for that is that technology is usually not the problem. My experience, technology is not the barrier. Technology is the easy part, actually, for the most part. So these are technical architecture, very sophisticated. We have data in the source systems. We copy that data in real time to our data platform, and we do stuff with it in the data platform, right? And by doing stuff, I mean we have BI solutions. We use Tableau. We use MapPar of our backend big data platform, right? We have data science platforms. We are starting to use R and all the things that have been mentioned. But the key is that that's usually not the challenge. Technology, for me, in my experience, is the easy part. Again, is what do you do with it and how do you get all stakeholders aligned to ensure that happens. So the first thing that I talked about was strategic alignment. And usually you tend to think, well, from a business perspective, I need to be aligned with the technology. My technology partner is to be aligned with me to be able to give me the tools, the data, all the capabilities that I need to explore and build data products. And that's true, except that the context in which you are operating from a data analytics perspective will drive which other actors need to be aligned with me to be successful in my strategy. In our case, we think about data in 3 dimensions. The first dimension, the most important dimension for us was that data is a product. Data is something we can actually take, build products, and monetize. And this is interesting because usually companies start differently. Companies start by saying, I will use data internally to create internal value, and maybe then I'll pivot to the market and sell this data externally or sell data products externally. We actually started the other way around. The second dimension for us was, and I apologize, so what that means is that from an alignment perspective, me as the head of business, as the head of data in the business, I need to be aligned with the teams that sell products to our clients because they need to understand how to sell products. Otherwise, I'm not going to be successful. I can build products all day long, data products all day long, but if my sales teams can't sell them, then I'm not being successful, right? I have technology to give me the tools, I can build the products, but if I can't sell them, I won't be successful. The second dimension is that we also think about data as an enabler. And what does that mean? It means that we as a company not only have the core processing service, which is again the core use of mainframes to process transactions, but we are building a very rich ancillary number of data of products and services around the core processing that will add value to our customers. So what are things, for example, like fraud? We're really good at catching fraud, but we're building more products or better products that will catch more fraud and different types of fraud. So data and analytics also plays a role in making the fraud platform better, providing more data to the fraud platform. Or think about, for example, loyalty. Our clients use us to actually manage loyalty programs, that cashback programs, points programs. There are data products I can build to actually enable better success for the loyalty platform. So that's what I mean by data being an enabler. So from an alignment perspective, what that means is that I need to be aligned with my peers in the product organization to understand what are you doing with data? What are you doing with your product so I can help you with data? Again, and that brings more actors that need to be aligned with what I'm trying to do to align the technology, the processes, and the things that I need to be successful. And the third point is that if we are talking this big game of being a data company, we better eat our own dog food. We better have the internal people and teams who can talk data to our clients. Because again, the data products that we build, we can build, a data product could be a dashboard or an algorithm or something. Our clients will not embrace it if we cannot talk about it. So that means that we need to change the company to have a data culture that comes along and actually drives the adoption of data products. So again, strategic alignment, technology usually in my experience again is the easy part. I have great counterparts in technology. On the other side of the equation, when I talked about business, you could easily see how it's not just one business actor, it's a multitude of business actors that I need to align to make sure that we are all on the same page of the same book to be able to drive analytics forward. But then there's other actors. Think about, for example, in our case, legal and InfoSec, right? Key actors that say, how are you going to secure the data? How are you going to build contracts of these new types of data products? And legal was particularly interesting because when we started doing this, going through this journey with our, building our roadmaps for data products, our legal team told us to do this, you actually need to get every client to sign an amendment that you can actually just move the data into the data lake. Just that step, right? Which again, on one hand is good. It's job security. It's like, 200 clients. We're going to spend the next 15 years getting, 200 amendments signed. But on the other hand, the challenge here was that we had to spend a lot of time educating the lawyers, telling them, no. That's no different. The data lake is a technology platform. What I'm building on top of it, and when my clients buy these products, of course I need them to sign amendments. But again, it was the necessary element of who's your stakeholders, how do they approach this problem, and how do you actually mitigate the barriers you may have to implement your data product successfully. Again, talked about this. The second point that I highlighted in the article was what I call lead by example, but it's more relevant probably call it change management. And in that notion, that who are the change agents that are going to help you drive a successful data analytics program. So in our case, again, we've seen this before, the significant amount of data and commitments, how do we get to monetization? And you can start see a theme how the internal culture really was the barrier for us to get there. And then so how do you change a culture like TSYS? How do you work with a company that has been so focused on just core processing in the use of mainframes and that technology to actually adopt this? And what we found was actually, that using our clients as external change agents allowed us to actually circumvent that barrier and drive the change. And what do I mean by that? So we had to spend a lot of time with our clients showing them the journey we were going through, showing the data pros we're going to build for them. And we were able to articulate to our clients why we're using data and how we're going to use their data to solve their problems. Our clients turned around and told the company and the Excel, oh, this makes a lot of sense. So I was using an external agent to change the culture. Again, how do you overcome the barriers? Because nothing that we're building is something that, people have built the type of products we're building. But how do you get these products to be a adopted by the company to be sold and implemented. In that journey, and this is a really cool article that actually explains the difference in, one of the challenges is that we as a company are actually too client-centric. And you wonder, like, how can you say that you're too client-centric? Well, as a company, we actually are too focused on being kind of having an order-taking mentality from the clients. Client says A and we do A. Client says B and we do B. And in this data journey, because data products add value differently, we had to actually change the mindset from, don't tell me what to do, clients, so help me understand what you're trying to accomplish. What solutions, what business problems do you have? And how can I use data to solve those business problems? That also meant, changing the way we think about data in the company. And this is an oversimplified framework of one of the hundreds of, data maturity frameworks or data frameworks data analytics frameworks that are out there in the industry. Well, what it says basically is that, first of all, raw data is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about insights. How can we provide insights to our clients to help them understand their business problems at the right time, at the right level, with the right data? The second point was, how do we actually make predictions that actually can help our clients predict behaviors? And then ultimately, how do we actually take action with that data and then make this a big improvement loop that make things better over time? But again, the key challenge here was that, at the end of the day, if you're not taking action with the data is absolutely useless. And that means that you have to understand what problems are going to solve through which actions. This is one of the things we've talked about throughout the day is sort of the challenges that you have with data. And one of the key things is that, many times people underestimate the importance of things like data quality and data management. And I love this is a really good article, but the quote that someone shared with me was more interesting. Like, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Nobody wants to pay the price of doing data the right way, having the right people, person, technology to leverage data. It's easy to do one of those pieces, but you always forget that to do machine learning or AI or some of the really cool things we've talked about throughout the day, you actually need data and good capabilities. So where does this leave us, so far? We talked about the potential opportunity we have. I've talked about strategic alignment, change management, the importance of education, changing the culture of the company through education, and then came expectations. And expectations materialize itself by saying, how do we get from the current state to the state of having modern data management capabilities, right? Again, I keep talking about capabilities because it's usually the point of needing not only the data, but also the people, the person, the technology to leverage value. And so one of the big challenges that I had was that because we hadn't invested anything in data throughout time, or very little in data throughout time, right? And now we're coming here to build this modern, robust data platform, that the perception gap of the investment was huge, right? Because saying, we didn't even have a data warehouses, or we have very rudimentary warehouses internally. And they were saying, we're going to build this big data platform with all these data science capabilities. That's a lot of data. That's a lot of money to invest in that. But the key challenge also was that it's not just the data, but also the people and the processes necessary to make the data usable the right way. And that means that one of the key things that had been forgotten on this journey, or that was a challenge to sell to the company along this journey, was the fact that, we can do the technology pieces of taking the data from the source systems, loading into the platform, but without a data quality framework, without a data management framework underneath that did data governance, data quality, master data management, it's going to be very challenging to do things the right way. And this is even more interesting when you start talking about data science and models, because especially in the financial services industry, in case you're not familiar in the financial services, banks are heavily regulated, particularly on models. And there's a whole space, a whole domain called model risk management that is actually having to document what your models do, the behaviors of the models, the actual, and the challenge they present that a lot of the things we've talked about today actually are black box models that you don't understand what they're doing, but they have an outcome. In our case, we can't afford that, because if we actually present solutions to our clients that are based on models that are a black box, and if the consumer, the credit card holder, complains or files a lawsuit against the client, against the issuer, we have to explain why did you use that model to make that decision, and then if the model is a black box, you can't, right? But again, highlights the importance of data management and the things you have to do that go beyond just the actual building of the model and the algorithm. So in a nutshell, where are we in our journey? We funded the platform and the strategy in October of last year. I should have probably updated this slide because we are actually delayed a couple of months in going live, but we went live with our wave one of data products. And our wave one of data products are heavily focused on providing descriptive views of data to our clients, to the issuers, to the banks that actually use us as a service. We are immediately pivoting into what we call wave two type products, which are much more, again, now that we have data, good data, quality data, how do we build then predictive analytics-based products that allows us to go to a whole new level? So 9 months from funding, or 10 months from funding to deliver is not bad, particularly when we're jumping, when you think about we had nothing, a culture that actually was not driven or that wasn't conducive to data analytics to get to this point. So to finalize and to close, I was giving the signal, what are our challenges going forward? And things that I would leave you to think about as you go into your data journeys. One is data rights. Not because the data exists doesn't mean that you can use it, right? And many times, that gets forgotten. In our case, we think about it, the data we hold is actually our clients' data, it's the bank's data, it's not necessarily our data. So there's a lot of things we can do for our clients. I can build data products for Capital One, or for Regions Bank, or for Bank of America. But the real value of the data we hold is when you start building products that actually cut across the banks. So think about by having 40% or by seeing 40% of the consumer credit card transactions in the US, in some markets or industries, we're actually seeing a significant amount larger than that of transactions. We could be building retail spend indexes or things of that nature with the data we have. But that crosses into domains of data that we don't know we have the rights. Again, and you solve that, you solve the data rights questions through data governance and working with the legal teams. The second challenge we're facing now that we're building this is before we actually had our strategy in place, there's a lot of naysayers. People saying, no, you can't do it, you can. But now that we built it, everyone has to jump in. And everyone has to jump in by saying, oh, we'll give you all my data and put in the data lake and hopefully magic things happen like that. No. Again, you have to focus on value-based outcomes. What are you trying to accomplish and how are you going to get and build value out of that? But finally, the third point I think is the most important one is data literacy. And it's been talked about a few times today. How do you actually make the company or the organization you belong to understand the value of data? And this is, Gartner has done some really interesting research in this space on key lessons learned from how to address that and how to change that. So again, to finalize, sorry to pop your bubble. This stuff is hard, right? There's many more things beyond the cool stuff we talked about today. But it's really important to keep those in mind, right? I summarize it again, strategic alignment, change management, the importance of education and culture, and how to manage expectations in your company. Thank you so much.